Saudi Arabia, which are providing clandestine financial and logistic support to ISIL and other radical Sunni groups in the region. So that's soon after her being Secretary of State. It seems like she would be informed about what's happening. Does the U.S. believe that Qatar, the governments of Qatar and Saudi Arabia, are providing clandestine financial and logistic support to ISIS and other radical Sunni groups?
I can't, I'm sure this will shock you, but I'm not going to speak about the veracity of leaked documents and whether they're authentic or not. I just won't do that. What I can tell you is that Qatar and Saudi Arabia are members of the counter-ISIL coalition and have been contributing members of that coalition's pretty much since its founding. And we rely a great deal on their efforts to help us counter terrorism in the region, particularly counter this particular group, Daesh, and we look forward to those relationships continuing and their participation as active members of the coalition continuing as well. Okay, Syria.
Our correspondent reporting from Western Aleppo interviewed locals who say fighters in the rebel-held east deliberately fire at civilians who are trying to leave. Aren't these people effectively held in Aleppo, in eastern Aleppo?
I can't confirm that report. You know, I don't get into battlefield reports. I'm not going to do that. What is without dispute is that the siege of Aleppo continues, as I was mentioning earlier, and you know, your question about being held hostage. There should be, you know, and I've seen, you know, reports that they're allowed to leave. They shouldn't have to leave, and they shouldn't be being bombed by their own government and by the Russian military, and that's what needs to stop.
That place, eastern Aleppo, is run by al-Qaeda militarily. How do you imagine people living peacefully under al-Qaeda?
I think, first of all, I'm not going to get into a debate about who runs what neighborhood in Aleppo with you. We've been clear, and so has 65 other nations have been clear that the threat of terrorism in Syria is significant, predominantly from Daesh and from al-Nusra, which we consider al-Qaeda in Syria. And that's why the coalition will continue operations across multiple lines of effort, not just military, to degrade and defeat, particularly Daesh inside Syria. So if your question is, you know, how can people live under the jackboot of terrorism, I would agree that that's not something we want them, a choice that we want them to have to make. They shouldn't have to do that, which is why the coalition is so focused on that group.
Well, isn't the way to really protect civilians is to get them out of there? Because al-Nusra is not leaving, apparently. Neither are the rebels who are intertwined with them.
And they're not likely to want to leave while they're continuing to be bombed. What needs to happen is a cessation of hostility, and the bombing needs to stop. And who's doing the bombing? It's the regime, and it's Russia.
Is it the U.S. strategy just to let al-Qaeda run that place?
I'm not even going to dignify that question with an answer. I'm just not even going to dignify it.
So, yeah, I just wanted to ask you: is it conceivable that you know, elements of al-Nusra could be holding members of the population hostage or at gunpoint, preventing them from?
I don't have any information on that side.
But it could conceivably be that.
Again, you're asking me to speculate on a hypothetical here. Look, we've been very clear about the threat that al-Nusra poses, and that they are outside the cessation of hostilities, clearly. And what we've long said, that if Russia wanted to contribute to counter-ISIL efforts in a meaningful way, that was a conversation that we'd be willing to have and continue to be willing to have. But what they have proven to want to do is rather support Assad, bolster his regime, and bolster his efforts in this siege of Aleppo.
So what you want is a complete cessation of hostility or complete cessation of bombing by the Syrians and the Russians. And then what? And then what would be the next step?
Well, you're right. What we want is a cessation of hostilities. Okay. And I'd go back to February of this year when even the Russians signed up to exactly that thing.
As far as Eastern Aleppo is concerned.
No. Yes, obviously we want to see the bombing and the siege of Aleppo stop. But more critically, we want to see a nationwide cessation of hostilities that can be sustained over time so that we can get the political discussions back on track. Now, look, we had in September 9th, just earlier, well, about a month ago, you know, we had struck an agreement in Geneva with the Russians that, you know, after 7 days of reduced violence and the return of humanitarian assistance to particularly besieged places like Aleppo, that we could then begin to have to establish a joint implementation center by which the United States and Russia would cooperate and share information to go after groups like al-Nusra. In fact, it was specifically designed to help us together go after al-Nusra. But we didn't get those 7 days of reduced violence, and we didn't get any humanitarian assistance in any significant way. And you know the rest of the story. We regrettably, because of Russia's actions, because of their intransigence and unwillingness to meet their commitments under that agreement, we had to suspend the bilateral cooperation in that regard.
Is that agreement revivable? Is it revivable, that agreement?
I think
Could it be revived?
the Secretary has said that it is. Absolutely. We suspended. That doesn't mean that it's forever off. And what we continue to need to see are significant steps by the Russians that they're serious about their commitments. And they have thus far proven quite the opposite. Yeah.
Turkey's president today affirmed that Turkey will take part in the military operation to recapture Mosul, and that Turkey would not follow the direction of Iraq's prime minister. In fact, Erdogan was insulting. He said to Abadi, quote, "Know your own place. Your clamoring is not important." What is your view of this?
I think, as we've long said, and I think you heard Brett McGurk say this himself on Friday when he was up here, all of Iraq's neighbors need to respect Iraqi sovereignty and territorial integrity. The Turkish forces that are deployed in Iraq are not there as part of the international coalition. And the situation in Bashika is a matter for the governments of Iraq and Turkey to resolve. What we support is continued dialogue between them that can lead to a speedy resolution of the matter. We call on both governments to focus on their common enemy, our common enemy, which is Daesh. Over the coming days and weeks, we believe it's imperative for all the parties to closely coordinate next steps to ensure unity of effort in that counter-Daesh fight.
The Turks today played a clip from a press conference in which Abadi states in this press conference with the Turkish prime minister that he had demanded, quote, military intelligence, arms, and training support from Turkey. And it does seem like the Turks have a case that they were invited in.
Again, I'm not aware of those comments. I haven't seen that clip. Prime Minister Abadi has made it clear publicly that they weren't. We don't hold them as there as part of the coalition, the international coalition, and we want Iraq and Turkey to work this out together through dialogue. Okay?
Same topic. One follow-up, please. Some local officials, Iraqi officials, such as former Governor Nujaifi, also says, who is coordinating with Turkey, that the Mosul operation will be starting in a day or two. And another timetable given by the Turkish president also is saying that sometime between next week, Mosul operation will start. Is this your understanding that the timetable will be in a day or two or the next week?
The campaign to retake Mosul is an Iraqi campaign. It's an Iraqi plan and an Iraqi strategy. The United States forces will support that as we have in the past. Other military operations conducted by the Iraqi security forces inside Iraq. And like they have done in the past, they will do it at a time of their choosing when they believe they're ready. And I wouldn't begin to speak to future operations one way or another from the podium.
So when Iraqi Prime Minister talks about the Mosul operation, he is the most authoritative voice. Is this the understanding?
The Iraqi security forces report to the government of Iraq. Prime Minister Abadi ultimately makes these decisions, and we leave it to him to both make those decisions and then speak to them when he is willing to do so. And I'm not going to get ahead of him on that. Yeah.
On North Korea. So the 10th anniversary of the first nuclear test came and passed, but I was wondering if there is any sense of relief, or are you still on heightened alert for possible missile firings or nuclear tests?
I think we're always vigilant to potential North Korean provocations.
And Danny Russell earlier this morning mentioned that there may be further progress in sanctions. I was wondering if you had any further details on that.
I don't have anything additional to add. I mean, but I think you may have seen comments by Ambassador Power to a similar point, to a similar degree, talking about the work that we continue to do inside the UN to pursue additional sanctions. I just don't have anything to update you on.
And then do you have any further detail about next week's 2+2 meeting, other than what he had sent out?
Other than what?
What he had sent out.
No, I mean, we're looking forward to the discussion. I don't have anything additional to lay out for you. We'll obviously keep you posted if there's any schedule changes or anything. The Secretary's looking forward to the dialogue. Jenny?
Korea, Ambassador Power emphasized that the U.S. use all of the tools for the sanctions against North Korea. Specifically, what other tools U.S. can use for the pressure to North Korea?
Well, we've talked about this many times, and sanctions are one tool. And as we've made clear, their recent activities have galvanized the international community to seek potential additional sanctions. And sanctions take time. It doesn't mean that they're not a valuable tool and they can't be effective, but they do take time to work. I'm not going to speculate about additional measures that the international community may or may not want to pursue. Certainly not going to speak unilaterally for the U.S. in this regard. We believe it's important to continue to work through the UN and with the international community because pressure applied from everybody, we still believe is going to be more effective. But we'll see, where these discussions take us.
Does the U.S. sanctions included humanitarian aid too?
Does the
Humanitarian.
does what include humanitarian?
U.S. individual sanctions included the North Korean humanitarian assistance.
Well, again, so far the sanctions that have been applied really are against members of the regime and about the resources that they have. And I'm not going to get ahead of the specifics of future sanctions. That discussion's ongoing right now, and I don't think it would be helpful for me to get into speculation about what they're going to look like and how we're going to try to implement them should they be passed.
But the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, he didn't take care of their people starving death. He always think about the nuclear programs, their developing nuclear weapons. Why the international country should take care of humanitarian aid to North Korea because their leader didn't take care of their peoples. So what is your comment on that?
Again, we're going to continue to apply pressure on the North, and we're going to continue to work with international partners to do that just as effectively as possible. I'm not going to speculate about what a future sanctions regime might look like. Obviously, we're working through that right now. But stepping back from North Korea and just try to address your question as best I can. Humanitarian assistance in a non-permissive environment, and I think we'd all agree that the North is a non-permissive environment, comes with a lot of risks and consequences that any nation state needs to think through before you try to implement that.
But he using that. Kim Jong-un using that humanitarian resistance, like food. South Korea sent 100 cows to North Korea. It's gone, but worse than beef gone. So why you consider about humanitarian assistance to North Korea? That's what I
can appreciate the reattack on the question. I really think I've addressed this as far as I can go, Jenny. We're going to continue to look for ways to apply more pressure to the regime through the international community, and I'm really not going to speculate about what those tools are going to look like going forward. We're having those active discussions right now. Mike?
Can I have a quick follow-up? I just want to make sure I understand. So you were saying that you were looking at the future